Welcome back to another video, guys. So one of the things when it comes to Xbox Game Pass is the different tiers of Game Pass. How much does each tier comprise of in terms of a percentage of the total of Game Pass subscribers? We know Game Pass has the console, the PC, and then the ultimate subscription tier. And then Xbox Game Pass Core is also going to be coming around the corner, and that will probably comprise of a ton of Game Pass subscribers, as people who are currently subscribed to Gold are going to be automatically transferred over to Core. But Game Pass Ultimate is ultimately where Xbox wants everybody to end up at. It's the most expensive tier. It gives you everything, access to console, PC, and anything that you really need. Xbox Cloud Gaming, it is the best tier as well to be subscribed to. Now, we actually have some more information here in the percentage that it actually makes up in terms of Game Pass subscribers. This comes from a report published by the European Commission, and it says here that Game Pass Ultimate accounts for 70 to 80% of all Game Pass subscribers. Specifically in the document, it says with Game Pass Ultimate, which accounts for nearly 70 to 80% of the current redacted million number of Game Pass subscribers. And they also say the launch and growth of Game Pass, including its top tier Game Pass Ultimate that offers a cloud game streaming functionality, is a building block of such commercial strategy. So that's pretty big. That's some big information here when we're looking at the profitability and the overall success of Xbox Game Pass. 70 to 80% of their subscribers are at the highest tier. I think it's like $16.99 a month or something. Right now, they did raise it that $1 extra, which I think is absolutely worth it with the amount of content in there, all of the first party stuff and the access you get across all of the different devices. And we haven't even gotten the Activision Blizzard games added into this service. So Game Pass Ultimate is going to continue to increase. More people are going to be paying that amount of money. And I think when we're talking about profitability, Phil Spencer's already said that Game Pass is profitable. In fact, this was a report back from June 12th and then updated on June 29th. We can actually see here the percentages of the content and services, which includes full game sales, monetization, and subscriptions like Xbox Game Pass. And based on percentages provided by Phil Spencer in 2022, the further investigation reveals that Game Pass could have made as much as 10 to 15% of Xbox's digital revenues, representing a range of $1.197 billion to $1.796 billion for the calendar year 2022. And of course, we have that quote from Phil Spencer because he was essentially, people were continuously asking this, and he finally probably just had enough of the question because it's obvious that the Game Pass is profitable. He says Game Pass is profitable, Xbox is profitable. I've said it is sustainable, but people ask me what I meant or what I mean by that. And he says, for this, I'm going to take it back to console, the olden days when we just did games on console. Every time we shipped a console, we pretended that Sony and Nintendo didn't exist. So anytime you look at a game, you said, hey, you're not shipping this game on the full console base. You're excluding, let's call it 2/3 of the market. And this is kind of where Game Pass comes in and takes care of that, because you have that ability to open it up to way more people. Yes, you're not going to get access to some of the people on PlayStation or on Nintendo who aren't going to be playing these games and are only ever going to stay on those platforms. But because Game Pass is available literally everywhere, you get far more access than you did previously by keeping games locked to a singular device. But the entirety of 70-80% of people who have signed up to Xbox Game Pass is a huge number. And you could argue, you're going to get a lot of arguments of as people saying, oh, that's probably the majority of the $1 deal for 1 month. And it probably does make up a certain percentage of it, but the majority of people from the 70 to 80% of Game Pass subscribers on Ultimate are probably paying full price. And this is something that obviously Xbox is looking at. They just went out and purchased Activision Blizzard, and they wouldn't be doing purchases like this if they weren't seeing huge success in the numbers for Xbox Game Pass. So I'm expecting more acquisitions in the future after seeing stuff like this. I'm expecting Xbox to try to want to continue to bolster the Game Pass library and the subscription model in order to make sure that content is always coming in and try to get even higher numbers in the amount of people subscribed and how long they stay subscribed for, and the engagement numbers and the monthly active users. We know that they were up 22% in overall engagement and monthly active users. So that's all stuff that is looking up for Game Pass and for the Xbox ecosystem if you're somebody who's a fan or if you're somebody who is currently subscribed to the service. And when it comes to acquisitions, we have Sarah Bond here again. I mean, it's hard to take away anything from this. It probably like I say, always means nothing. This is just like, take this with a huge grain of salt, but she's continuously putting in her faces Sonic and Sega all the time. It really seems like there's a hint here, but it may just be she loves Sonic and Sega so much. But she responded to this post here from Activision Blizzard saying, "Happy Friendship Day. What's your favorite video game friendship of all time?" And Sarah Baum responds, "Happy Friendship Day. What's your favorite video game friendship of all time? My first favorite is Sonic and Tails." I mean, there are so many different other friendships out there she could have chosen. But if you think about the picture of the Sega building that she intentionally took, the hedgehog running around the Microsoft offices, the fact that Microsoft in their documents had said that Sega was like one of the top companies and publishers out there that they were looking to acquire, and then this as well, it's just continuously adding up that they obviously love Sega at the very least. They love that relationship that they have with them. But I think if we're looking at an acquisition going forward, if Xbox is seriously looking to gain in Japan, Sega is an absolute no-brainer. And people are always going to continuously talk about this as more teases and more things like this are put out by the top executives over at Xbox. Again, I know I talked about this in the last couple of videos because I get excited when I see this stuff too, because I think Sega is awesome. I love Sega franchises. I've literally just been playing through Sonic Origins Plus, playing through all the old Sonic games and having a fun time. So it'd be great to see more Sonic and Sega games jumping in to Game Pass at the very least, even if there isn't an acquisition in its horizon. Now let's jump over here and let's talk about this. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. The game has released on PC, and this game has had just a ton of controversy with its release on PC for a couple of reasons. The biggest one of all is that it's official now that this game does not need the magical PlayStation 5 SSD to run. It can run on a hard drive device. And there has been a lot of misinformation out there. There have been articles from IGN that they put out, which just were plainly lying, basically in their headlines, saying that it can barely run on a hard drive device, which isn't true. It's Digital Foundry did their analysis and they were using an old PS4 hard drive and it was having issues on a 10-year-old PS4 hard drive. But just under the tweet that they had put out, where everybody was quote tweeting it or quote Xing it, whatever you want to call it, and talking about it and saying that people owe Insomniac an apology, right under that tweet, everyone literally just ignored them clarifying that it wasn't working on the 5400 RPM hard drive device, but it works okay. It works fine on the 7200 RPM hard drive device. So it can run on an HDD. That is a fact. That is something that we now know, that you do not need the PS5 SSD to run this game. You also can run this on different SSDs that are slower than the PlayStation 5 SSD. And in the official requirements, the minimal requirements that Insomniac put out themselves, you can play this game on a hard drive device and it runs on the Steam Deck. So it's crazy that some of the articles out there are still pushing home a point that was debunked by the people who got people talking about that original point right off the bat, which was Digital Foundry. But we have this here, released on PC, and it says that Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart sees PlayStation's third worst Steam launch to date. Now, what does that mean in terms of the numbers? Well, it means this. As per Steam database, on the day of its release, the game saw a peak concurrent user count of just 8,757 players. It says it makes Rift Apart PlayStation's third worst launch on the platform to date. It slots above Returnal, which had 6,691 peak concurrent users on the Steam launch, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, which had 610, and below Uncharted Legacy: A Thief's Collection at 10,851. And you can see the numbers here. You had God of War 73,000, Spider-Man Remastered 66, Horizon Zero Dawn at 56. Go down the list. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart at 8,757. So that's obviously not something that they want. This is something that they would want to see a lot more people playing on day one, a lot more people jumping in and purchasing this game on Steam, because the reason why they released this game on PC 2 years after its launch is to revitalize those sales and get people talking about it again, when I'm guessing the sales of Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart have pretty much come to a complete halt on the PlayStation platform. Now, this to me yells that PlayStation may start looking at this strategy, because I believe that if they were to have released this on PC day one, the same day that they did release it on PlayStation 5, this number here, 8,000, would be far, far greater. It would be way bigger, maybe even be at the top of this list. You would have way more people jumping in and playing the game on PC when there was a ton of hype around it and everybody was talking about it on the PS5. And then you have the PC users out there that probably are looking at it coming out on the PS5, getting excited, and then seeing how it can run on the PC. Can it get higher resolutions? Can it get better frame rates? All of that type of stuff. But now, 2 years later, people just don't really care as much about this game with other stuff coming out down the line. And maybe going forward, PlayStation is going to be changing up their strategy and launching these games at the PC day one. I think that they will. I truly do. I know I've said this before, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but by the end of this generation, going into the next generation, I think we will see PlayStation releasing their first party games day and dates on PC, as well as potentially into the PlayStation Plus subscription. It just makes a ton of sense. And when we see more numbers like this will probably push home the point that that is going to change. I know we've already seen the articles come out that PlayStation talked to PlayStation gamers, and the gamers have said that 2 years after the original launch of these games is where they think it's a good time to launch games onto PC, but they don't really specify how they did this, how they reached out to these gamers and all that type of stuff. So this number here, I think, will help push that forward faster than PlayStation wants to push it forward. And finally, let's talk about this. Baldur's Gate 3. This game is coming out on all the platforms. And one of the things that has been dominating the headlines for this game, other than potentially it being one of the best RPGs to come out in a long time, and it going directly against Starfield in terms of RPGs, maybe people are saying maybe it's getting a lot of traction for that because it is multi-platform. It is on PlayStation, so they need something to put up against Starfield when Starfield does come out. But I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be a great game. However, one of the things that was very disappointing with Larian Studios and Baldur's Gate 3 was all the narratives that were coming out about the Xbox Series S and the Xbox Series S holding back development. As we know, they haven't been able to give an official launch date for the Xbox version because they haven't been able to get the game running the way they wanted on the Series S, specifically with the couch co-op. And that is something we've seen in previous titles. Couch co-op, for some reason, has been more difficult to get running smoothly with games this generation. But Larian Studios actually clarify this. And they say that the Series S doesn't hold back development and more like takes a lot more effort, specifically from a smaller studio, because they do not have the resources to work on all of the platforms. And they gave an example of how hard it was to port games on the Switch. And I honestly, when they first talked about the Xbox stuff, that's what I was thinking, was that they're not the biggest studio. I think there's about 400 employees from when I last saw it. I could be wrong on the number, but that's what I remember reading. And for them to take the resources to port it to the Xbox Series S, it takes more time and it takes more money, and it's heavier on the studio than if you're a massive studio like, let's say, a Ubisoft or an EA, where you have unlimited resources to be able to do that. But I mean, it's an interesting thing to talk about because I look at these consoles and they are essentially the same. They are essentially PCs. They all have AMD, they have x86 architecture. And to me, how much harder can it be to just get this to run on the Series S when this game is going to be running on very low end PCs or minimum spec PCs when it does release? Maybe it's just something they did not prioritize. This is probably something Xbox needs to send over developers to help them get it running on the Series S in time so an Xbox release date can come. But it has nothing to do with the Series S holding back development. This has to do with the actual development studios holding back this game from being able to release on time from Xbox because they do not have the resources to be able to get it run the way that they wanted to run. And we'll see if this does release on time on the Xbox platform. The other thing this also kind of gets you thinking about is the Pro version of these consoles. If the PS5 Pro puts out another console, that's just another SKU for these developers to have to optimize games for. Are they going to have issues then optimizing games for the base PlayStation 5 if they have to optimize them all for the PS5 Pro? We'll see if that happens there. And if Xbox were to put out another console, that's just going to cause more issues for these developers. All that stuff gets called into question, and we'll see if the same stuff happens going forward if there are more SKUs released onto the market. But I will leave the video there, guys. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up. If you are new here, hit that subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.